A record number of young adults in America are living with their parents. In 2025, 25.2 million adults under the age of 35 were living in a parent's home, higher than at any point on record, including the peak of the COVID pandemic. Roughly 1 in 3 people between 18 and 34 now shares a roof with a parent. Most of them have jobs. This is not a story about laziness or failure. It is a story about what the numbers show is actually happening and why. I'm Maria, and this is Clarity with Maria. Today, we're looking at the data behind the rise in young adults living at home, how large the trend is, who it affects most, and what the evidence points to as the main drivers. Let's start with the clearest figures. According to analyses of census and real estate data, 25.2 million adults under 35 lived with their parents in 2025. About 33% of 18 to 34-year-olds are in this situation, near the all-time high and well above levels from the early 2000s. The pattern is not limited to the youngest adults. Among those aged 25 to 34, the share living with parents has also risen substantially over the past 2 decades. Young men are more likely than young women to live at home, and the growth among people in their late 20s and early 30s is especially notable. These are not temporary pandemic leftovers. The numbers remained elevated well after restrictions ended and, in the latest data, reached new records. One detail often gets lost in the conversation. The majority of these young adults are employed. Among 25 to 34-year-olds living with parents, roughly 7 in 10 have jobs. Many are working full-time. The arrangement is frequently described by those in it as a financial decision rather than a preference for dependence. This changes how we should read the trend. It is not primarily a story of people dropping out of the labor force and returning home. It is more often a story of people who are working yet still find independent housing difficult to afford. The strongest and most consistent explanation in the data is the cost of housing. Home prices and rents have risen much faster than wages for young workers in many parts of the country over the past decade. Analyses repeatedly show a clear link between high housing costs, especially the share of income required for rent, and higher rates of young adults living with parents. In high-cost states and metro areas, the percentages are significantly elevated. In lower-cost regions, the shares are lower. The geographic pattern tracks affordability more closely than most other factors. When a larger share of income is required simply to rent a modest apartment, the financial logic of staying in a parental home becomes stronger, even for people with steady jobs. Housing costs are the dominant force, but they do not operate alone. Young adults are forming independent households later. The median age at first marriage has risen, and more people in their 20s and early 30s remain single. These shifts reduce one traditional path into independent living. Student debt, uneven early career earnings, and the high cost of starting a household also raise the bar for moving out. For many, living with parents is a practical way to save, pay down debt, or build a financial cushion. While cultural attitudes toward multi-generational living have softened in some communities, the sharpest increases still track most closely with housing affordability. Living with parents is not inherently negative. For some families, it works well and provides mutual support. But at the scale we are seeing, it reflects a broader delay in the traditional markers of independent adulthood. When a large share of people in their mid-20s and 30s cannot or do not establish their own households, it affects everything downstream, from relationship formation to long-term savings to the housing market itself. In the context of the series we've been examining, education outcomes, economic struggles, delayed independence, and loneliness, this trend fits as both a consequence and a reinforcing factor. The data is clear. A record number of young adults are living with their parents. Most of them are working. The primary driver is the high cost of housing relative to young workers' earnings, reinforced by later marriage, higher debt loads, and broader delays in establishing independent households. This is not a story that can be reduced to personal failure or cultural decline alone. The numbers point first to an affordability problem that has grown steadily over the past 2 decades and remains elevated. Understanding the scale and the main causes is the necessary starting point. The trend is large, measurable, and still unfolding, and it is reshaping the early adult years for a significant share of a generation. Thanks for watching Clarity with Maria. If you value honest, data-driven analysis that doesn't shy away from uncomfortable truths, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. New videos every Wednesday and Saturday. I'll see you in the next one.